Hello all brothers and sisters and friends. Today will be a rather long episode, so before starting, I want to share some small information. Because some of you have asked, besides YouTube, is there anywhere else you can listen to? In fact, I currently do not use any platform other than YouTube. And if the latter is the case, I will let everyone know later. In today's edition, I want to share with you my reading journey, as well as some of the experiences I have accumulated to help our reading be effective. And for me, books are one of the great joys in life. I have loved reading books for a long time since I was a child, and it is no exaggeration to say that most of what I have acquired until today is both in terms of work, knowledge and way of thinking. I often think that it's largely thanks to reading books, but in my reading journey there are also quite a few mistakes that today I will tell you all about in hopes that I can help you. You can avoid that mistake. To make your reading journey more effective and interesting, I divide my reading journey into several stages. First was the stage where I simply picked up a book and read it from beginning to end. I read one book after another, and after reading it, I didn't do anything else. Because this was a young age, most of the books I read were books like Robin Hood or adventure books like 20,000 Miles or 80 Days Around the World. So with these books, it's not a problem to just keep reading, but later when I started to get older, most of the books I read were books like Professional Skills or A Major. I realized that with that kind of reading, the amount of knowledge I gathered from books fell apart very quickly, and as soon as I finished reading it, I still remember a lot, but after a few weeks, most of it fell out. Only about 20 to 30% remained, and because of that way of reading, every time I encounter a related problem, I vaguely remember it. Where is this topic? Finding it again is a problem. As time goes by, I realize that this is not the right way, and then I begin to move to the second stage. I read at the same time that I take notes in this way. Basically, you only need a pen, a pencil is fine. The good point at this stage is that each time you reread a certain book, or if I need to find some knowledge in the book, those good ideas are available, so it's easier to look up. In addition, it helps me form a very important habit of reading and paying attention. The reason to pay attention is to retain the highlights of the good passages. Before I had this habit, sometimes when I read a book, I fell into the state of reading just for the sake of reading, with the words passing in front of me and not leaving anything behind. This highlight helps me focus more, thereby helping me grasp a lot of information. From the day I get into this habit, the amount of knowledge I have gained is much more. Absolutely. The old way had 20%. But this new way helps increase it up to 40%, twice as much as the old way. But that 40% is still low because we spent a lot of effort and time to read that book. We only get 40% of the knowledge in that book, which is such a waste. Then that's when I entered the third stage. The third stage is the stage when I discovered Kindle. I still remember that somewhere in 2007 or 2008, that was the time when Amazon released the first version of Kindle. For those of you who don't know, Kindle is a book reader. And why is it a book reader? Well, it's because its screen uses English electronic ink technology. It's e-ink, not an LCD screen like a phone or computer. So when reading with a Kindle it feels exactly the same that we read on the paper, and therefore it does not cause eye strain. In addition, every time we highlight in Kindle, it will save all those highlights in a separate area in the book, and from there we can easily access all the highlights we have. At that time, I really liked it because I thought this Kindle helped solve my need to look up all the highlights. Another reason was that at that time I found for me, my personal method of living is that it creates very positive changes in my life. There will be an occasion in another issue where I will share about this topic with you all. From that moment on, I completely switched to using Kindle. Now I only read mainly Kindle paper books that I have mostly been given as gifts, or I have bought them just to give to others. Then discovering the Kindle was my third stage. But because of using Kindle, I discovered that Audible and Audible are my fourth stage. The reason is that in a version that Amazon released later, Amazon introduced a technology that they call it publishing technology. The advertisement is that Kindle Direct Publishing will help synchronize the book we are reading with an audio book service called Audible service. That was the first time I knew Audible, and at that time I really liked it. Audible because Audible is the audio book format, which means it will read to us so we don't have to read anymore, and Audible has changed the way I absorb knowledge a lot, because with Audible I can listening while driving or jogging while listening or even eating while listening to the same podcast format that you guys are listening to. That was the same time when I came to Australia where I lived. But in Australian, people go to work by public transport. It's very rare for anyone to drive to work, but the city of Sydney, the city I live in, is very large. Sitting on public transport from 20 to 30 minutes from home to office is very normal. Even for others it takes much longer. Most of the time the books I read are on Audible. I listen to them a lot and then move on. Thursday. And because at that time I was very passionate about Audible, so I started participating in reading communities on Audible, and from there I discovered the fast reading technique on Audible in the Audible app, allowing me to increase my reading ability. The speed of reading helps me spend more time reading books faster to practice this method. It's also very easy. First, you can practice by increasing your reading speed to about 1.3. After a while, when I get used to that speed, you can increase it to 1.4 or 1.5. And so continue listening for a while. The time stays like that and then increases if you want. As for me personally, it's because I've been listening to this method for quite a while, so now for books that aren't too complicated, I listen to them in 1.7 mode, and for books that are a bit complicated, then I listen at 1.5. So you can imagine that with that speed, I will save a lot of time and still collect the same amount of knowledge. So this method is one of the experiences. But until now I still often share it with my friends around me, and everyone, after a while, come back and share with me, and it's really effective, so you should try it, just practice later. After a while, you get used to the new speed. Try opening the 1.0 speed again, and at that point you will see it is very slow. Unnecessarily slow. Besides that, it also has another side benefit. It helps improve our English listening skills. As I repeat the English story, right when I first came to Australia, when I was still in Vietnam, I worked for most foreign companies, so every day I communicated and worked with people. Because of this, I thought my English was pretty good. But it wasn't until I moved to Australia that I realized my English was so bad. Later I learned that when foreigners come to Vietnam to work, they will slow down their speech so that we can understand them. And when I go to their country, they will speak at the normal speed in their country without any adjustment, and in addition, Australian people speak very fast, so in the early days in Australian I was very miserable. Department with the English department. On some occasion, I will tell about my process of learning English in Australian, which also has many interesting stories. Now returning to the Audible story, in general, since the day I discovered the speed reading technique, my reading life has turned a new page, and since then I have read a lot. On average, it takes me a few days to finish reading a book. I still remember the peak of my year, when I concluded that I had read more than 100 books during those years. That means I read a book every 2 to 3 days, and there are a lot of books. But our grandparents said that too much of anything is not good. Because of my love for Audible, after a while I realized that I was returning to the stage of reading just for the sake of reading. There are many disadvantages to the number of books I read. But the depth is not deep. I read hundreds of those books, but a lot of the knowledge fell away after I finished reading them. But finding a good book is difficult enough. Finding it and spending time reading it but only getting 30% of it is such a waste. To visualize it, finding a good book is like finding a delicious fruit. But the way I read it, it's like a delicious fruit. I take a few bites of each fruit and then I throw it away. If I eat hundreds of such fruits, the amount I eat is also a lot. But compared to what I threw away, it was such a waste. And from that thought, it goes to my fourth stage. And this stage is the stage that I want you to focus on and listen to. Because it really helps me a lot. This is a phase that is almost the opposite. This is the stage where I decided from now on I will focus more on quality than quantity. And I started sitting down and trying to build a way for myself to read books that would be effective, and my method is like this. This method takes a little more time and effort, but it's actually much more effective. At first, I still used Audible, but from now on I determined that Audible was just a tool for me to quickly scan the book. Audible, it helps me read books very quickly. So it will help me quickly find and grasp the entire book. And determine whether this book exists or not. Because as I said earlier, finding good books to read is also very important. Because reading a bad book is worse than not reading it at all. The first reason is that it wastes my time. The second thing is more important. In the long run it will make me lose the inspiration to read books. And that was the first step. After reading it once with Audible, I basically determined it. Well, this is a very good book. Then I will read it a second time. This time using Kindle, and during the reading process I will take notes. and I found a way to sync my notes on Kindle via Evernote. During that time, I used Evernote more and later I switched to Notion. For those of you who don't know, Evernote is a note-taking tool. So you imagine that in Evernote I have a folder. In there are all my notes from the books I've read. Sometimes when I go in there, I'll reread the notes. This way it helps me not forget the good ideas in this book that I have read. However, after a while, I discovered that this way I had to actively look for some information. But I want the information to come to me. So I searched on the internet and found a friend. Her name was Ali. This friend is a doctor living in the UK, and he also loves reading books and like to explore ways to make things more efficient. Through this friend, I learned about a Writeway service and it was exactly what I was looking for. What Writeway does is it connects to my Kindle account, and then it syncs all notes to the server. After that, every day it sends me an email, and in that email there is a random note that I saved while reading Kindle. Thanks to these methods, my notes will not be lost because Writeway digs up those notes itself. And it gives me back to read every day. I don't know if it's a coincidence or something, but there were many times in the emails they sent me. There were emails that the day I encountered them that were related to those notes. And there is also another advantage of Writeway, which is that in the future I won't use Evernote anymore, but I will switch to using Notion. Notion is a very powerful note-taking service, to the point where it is now my personal database, and Readwise helps me apply directly from Kindle to Notion. So now all the notes of the books I read are neatly arranged in Notion. In general, for those who are using Kindle, I highly recommend using Readwise. I will leave the registration link in the description for those who want to try it out. It seems like Readwise offers a trial period of 2 weeks or 1 month. After that time, you have to pay the fee. The fee is very cheap, about $5 to $10 a month. Now, have any of you followed what I shared until now? Then I can guarantee that the amount of knowledge that you can absorb will increase by at least 50 to 60%. That means with just a few simple setups, from now on you can tolerate 3 to 5 times more knowledge than the first stage of reading without doing anything. Now, I will continue to share with you the new stage, and this stage is the most useful stage for me, and if possible, I really advise you to try to reach the next stage. The stages after this stage, you can do it or not do it. This phase takes a bit of time, but it's very work in progress. It really helps me a lot. The reason it takes so long is that what I've shared so far is that you only need to do it once and you're done. We just need to set up the Kindle, then set up Readwise, then set up Notion. Then we only need to do it once. Once it's done, you don't need to do it anymore. Then just read Kindle, then highlight, and everything will run automatically. So with these next methods, you have to sit down and work a bit. That means you must try to practice such a simple habit. So every time you read a book, you use MindMap to summarize the main ideas of that book in a way that you understand. If you don't know how to use MindMap here, you can search Google, and there are many tools to help us make MindMap. MindMap is actually very easy to use, but if anyone doesn't know how to use MindMap, that's okay. Then you can summarize the book using any editing tool. When I have time, I will do a podcast to guide you on how to use MindMap effectively. Regarding structure, you can reuse the structure of the book itself. Each branch is a chapter. Each chapter you note down in the way you understand. It is important that it is recorded in your own voice. And if we do that slowly over a period of time, we will have a series of MindMaps from the books we have read, and personally, it is very useful to me when you need to find certain information again. Currently all the books I like have MindMap. Even books that I have read before but do not have MindMap, I still have to reread and make MindMap for them. So from my personal experience, I see that the way I do it is very simple, but it is extremely effective. And as I told you, you only need to stop at this step and it will be extremely effective. According to the score that we often use now, I can be confident that this method will help us increase the amount of knowledge we get from the book by probably 70 to 80%. If there is a drop, the drop is about 20 to 30%. Okay, then there are the next 2 steps that I am about to share with you guys. Temporarily, these are 2 advanced steps. I myself am slowly practicing, but I don't dare say it's become a habit yet. The first step is in the mind map. It just summarizes the content of the book. Now in this step, there will be one more section to record your thoughts and opinions. Which points I agree with and which points I disagree with. Then which points do I care about and which points do I not care about. What points do I think I will apply in my daily work and how do I apply it? In general, I have a part that is purely my personal perspective and the issue that the book is talking about. The key thing is that these are written from my own words. It's the way I think that stays in my head for a long time. Then every time I take it out and read it, I combine it with the mind map about the content right above. Almost all the content I grasped while reading, it came back almost completely. There wasn't much shedding. So this is my current stage and I'm also making it a habit. Now every time I finish reading a book or even while reading it, I immediately start writing this part. For me personally, I basically write but usually read a book. I have a lot of thoughts in my head, so when I sit down to write, it's quite easy for me. However, I also understand that there are some people who do not like to write or do not write well. In this case, I still advise you to try to write or delete whatever you want. Actually, I didn't show it to anyone. As long as it is my perspective and my writing voice, I have done it this way and found it very effective. And now I share with you the final part. To tell you the truth about this step, I'm just starting to do it. However, according to my research of people who have been doing this step for many years, everyone says that this is very worth doing. Actually, for me personally, even though I've just started doing it, it will more or less bring value to me in the future. Here let me share how to do it like this. So, all I have shared with you are the ways to do it now that I have been doing it for many years and have collected quite a large amount of good highlights and good knowledge from books. Plus the experiences and lessons that I have gathered in my daily life. All of those things are like I have a lot of bricks. Now in this step I will use all those bricks to rebuild a house with all the rooms. Specifically, I will make a page similar to the wiki page. I use Notion to do this because Notion gives links between pages, systematically linking all those bricks together in each segment of life. For example, in the field of professional experience, I have the field of communication experience and I have the field of life experience. Then there are many other aspects that relate to my life. Then each large page has small pages interspersed with subtopics and subtopics linked to the notes. Or the notes that I have collected so far, you guys can imagine in that way. Over time, I had a place to gather all my experiences. The lessons I have accumulated from my youth and everything are presented systematically. Follow the structure that will be easiest for me to access. It's funny to say that it's like a kind of book or a secret to my life. And I think it will bring a lot of value to myself. Now it's time for me to share with you all my reading journey. From the stages when I was stupidly reading books without knowing anything, just engrossed in reading without taking any notes until the stage when I was possessed by Audible for 1 year and read hundreds of books but they fell out quite a bit. Then until the period until now. The period where I focused more on quality than quantity. If you listen now, someone will probably say yes. Oh my God, why is reading a book so complicated? When reading a book, just enjoy the book. Why do you have to make everything so miserable? But you really have to do that. If you just rush into reading without any method, it will be a waste. What a waste, but wasting knowledge is a pity, isn't it? Personally, looking back now, I only wish that someone had shared these things with me a little sooner. Then now the amount of knowledge that I have gathered is much greater. By the way, I should add that the method I share is mainly to help you apply it to specialized books. As for books like relaxation, don't pay attention to these methods. Hopefully, through this rather long volume, I can help you and your friends have a more effective reading method, or at least I can convey the feeling of reading to you. Because it's actually very rewarding. So I would like to end this episode here and thank you all for listening. If you find me sharing these knowledge and methods useful, please share with your friends and remember to click the register button. See you again guys and gals in the next episode.